right, everybody. I am Steve. This is A is for Alice, B is for Bob, and C is for the continuation in my award-winning series on the life and times of Glenn Hughes. Installment number 3. We are covering the 1990s. And Glenn is getting to the end of his era of being a hellraiser. So let's kick this off. Maddie's coming here to join me. How you doing, girl? So 1990, well, finished off the 80s with the introduction of Pete Winkleman, who kind of became Glenn's de facto guardian angel, if you will. And he's a guy, he was one of the co-founders of Growing Magazine, and he now, I believe, owns a big football club out there in Wolverhampton. So Pete wants to introduce Glenn to another Wolverhampton dude, Robin George, and they end up recording an album together, but it gets put on the shelf for 30 years, so you'll hear me talk about that somewhere down the road here. So Glenn moves to Atlanta, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, he doesn't go into detail in his autobiography. His autobiography, it's not told in a true linear fashion. He kind of skips around and reminisces and backtracks, and so it's hard to keep up with him. So, and plus you have to imagine what his memory is like. So so they move to Atlanta, and he says to his wife, he says, "I love it here. I am never getting high in this house." Okay, within a week he's hooked up with a new dealer. But he's not doing coke. No. Speed is his drug of choice now. And do you know why this is in Glenn's words? It is great to shag to. You're a berber. So in the 80s, we touched on Glenn meeting or being flown out to Sweden to record with John Norum of White Lion fame, right? White Lion? Yeah. Is that who it is? I believe so. Anyway, now he does appear on this album. What's this thing called again? Face the Truth. Yes. And it's actually a pretty good album. It's 92, so it's kind of its time. Still a bit of a carryover from the 80s. One thing they do on here, a great cover version of Thin Lizzy's Opium Trail. Very true to the original. I mean, John, he's a bit of a shredder. I'm not a big fan of shredders, but I can put up with some of it on this album. And Glenn actually drops his voice here. He's singing more in the register, the tone of Phil Lynott. So very good album if you can find it. So what else happens in 92? Oh, Glenn ends up, and none of the band members of KLF can remember how it happened. It was supposed to be Axl Rose who was going to be guest singer on the song What Time Is Love. And Axl Rose was a no-show. So when they got Glenn to come down, he participates in it. You can even find the video on YouTube. I found it, watched it. I'm not going to say Glenn has a big part in it, but, and this is Glenn, I don't know if he's at his heaviest here, but it's not the thin down Glenn you're used to seeing. Not a bad song. So, and then also in this time, Glenn has a heart attack. And upon its release of this KLF song, he goes into the Betty Ford Clinic because he's thinking, oh, this song's going to be a big hit. This is going to relaunch my career. And the song does very well. I know that, but I don't know if that had anything to do with Glenn's career being reinvigorated. So, 92, is this 92 or 93? It is 92. Glenn puts out L.A. Blues Authority. So he's got a number of good people on here. I think he's got Ainsley Dunbar on here. And let me double check here. I mean, it's a decent album. I'm not going to say it's a must-have, but who else is on here? Oh, yeah. He's got Tony Franklin. You know Tony Franklin from The Firm. And, Mark Jordan on keyboards. So Does that? I think this is on Shrapnel Records, which that Mike Varney dude, he loves calling in legacy acts. So up next then is From Now On. And this is not a bad album. And actually, Glenn does a new updated version of Burn on here. So I think a lot of reasons why artists remake a song they did before is they're just doubling down on their royalties. So there you go. This is actually, I know a lot of his stuff. It's hard to find. So, and this is actually made in England. Then he put out a live album that year also, or no, in '94, called same year as Burning On, or From Now On, Burning Japan Live, and coincidentally he opens this with Burn, but you know that's a great opening track. So does his calling card Coast to Coast on here. Very fine album. I mean, this thing runs 75 minutes. So there you go. Now, '94, he does a tour, a fall tour in Europe. And he meets, guess what? A 21-year-old blonde in Stockholm. Okay? So they talk a little, they exchange numbers. And now keep in mind now, Glenn is still married at this point. So, he heads back to LA because now he's living in LA. I don't know if he doesn't explain it in his book how he went from Atlanta to LA, but he can't stop thinking of this girl. And he calls her up to wish her a Merry Christmas, and she tells him that she has broken up with her boyfriend. So for Glenn, let's call this perfect timing. Things are not going well at home with his wife Karen. I think it's Karen. I can't remember now because he goes through women so much. So he asks this young blonde from Sweden if he'd like to meet up in London in February. She says yes. So Glenn tells his wife. He says, "Yeah, I've got to go over there do some promo stuff," and you know, of course, she buys into it. And so he gets back late February of '95, and the very next day it is her birthday, her 29th birthday. So he asks her, he says, "What would you like for your birthday?" And she says to him, "I would like for you to move out." So that's it. Marriage is over, and he then goes back to London, or no, he finishes recording the album Feel, which came out in 1995, and he goes back to London to meet his new girlfriend. Now we roll into '96. Now, if you really know your Glenn Hughes or your Black Sabbath, especially Tony Iommi, Glenn and Tony hook up again and work on the DEP sessions. But those end up sitting on the shelves for another 8 or 9 years, I think it is. I will get to that in the next video. So I don't show anything unless it comes out during that time. So anything that gets delayed or it's a posthumous release, you're not going to see. Thankfully, we're not going to see anything posthumous because Glenn is still alive and kicking. So 1996, he releases the appropriately named Addiction. And this is a pretty good album. Like I say, you'd probably struggle to find this on vinyl now. It's on a kind of a reddish one. Like I say, I feel glad to have what I do of his discography, and it's a pretty big one, as you can tell. So around this time, I love stumbling across stories like this. He's looking for a new hairdresser. Okay, not a problem I have. He goes into a place where he meets a Swedish girl named Cindy Levinson. And they're talking, and she is actually married to an English musician. And he ends up being Lowell Tolhurst. He's co-founder of The Cure. So her husband Lyle, and Glenn, they become very good friends for like the next 4 years. Every Sunday they meet at the same place in Santa Barbara, I think it is, and they have Sunday brunch together. So, all right, so now we're in '97. Glenn and his Swedish girlfriend, they're starting to grow apart, and they go their separate ways. September of that year, I believe it is. So, and Glenn is over in Sweden, and he bumps into Gary Moore. Now, if you remember from the '80s, Gary and Glenn did not part on the best of terms. Glenn goes up to him, apologizes to him, tells him, "Man, I just wasn't in the right place at the right time. I'm sorry I let you down." Gary Moore accepts his apology. He says, "I'm glad to hear you've cleaned up your act." He says, "When you're ready to do a new album, I will gladly play on it." So now Glenn gets into this book where in between '94 and '97, he fell off the wagon 6 times and nobody knew about it. He just kind of went on these benders all alone, never talked to anybody. So now he's at his place and he starts taking ecstasy. And at about 5 in the morning, he gives this girl a call, come over to his house. She gets there and he tells her, he said, "You need to call an ambulance." He says, "I think I'm having a heart attack." Okay. So ambulance comes, picks him up. So they're driving to the hospital. Glenn, he's thrashing around, making a bunch of noise. And he said, "Oh man, I am not like these other addicts you pick up." And the driver, the paramedic, turns around and says, "Shut up, you piece of shit." He says, if you don't, I'm going to throw you out. For whatever reason, this is the moment. Glenn has the epiphany. He's being dressed down by the driver of the ambulance, and he says, "That's it." He says, "I decided right then and there I would never do drugs again," and he hasn't. He has stayed clean since then. So, I don't know. They say, you need something to kickstart you, and for whatever reason, that was it for Glenn. Then, in 1999, he puts out this very fine album, actually, The Way It Is. I mean, most of his stuff, I have more of it on CD than I do on vinyl, but I'd love to find any of these on vinyl that I cannot. And there you go. Actually, a pretty tame decade for Mr. Glenn Hughes. So I'm sorry if this one wasn't as exciting as the previous 2 decades. And now we'll go into the 2000s on the next one. And I thank you for tuning in.